Dead 99 Skull here to talk about the up and new coming UFC 3 coming out February 2nd. Now first, I'm already going to say this: you can pre-order the game right now. It's already out there on the store. You can already pre-order the game even though it comes out in 2018. Now let's talk about some new features that are going to be added in the game. Let's talk about what's going to be taken out. First, I'm going to talk about what's going to be taken out of the game, and I heard that parries are going to be taken out of the game. And in my opinion, I think it was a good idea. I think I like that parries are completely out of the game now, because in my opinion, they were OP, and people would agree parries are OP. I mean, you have a guy that's headhunting you. You're sitting there, you're backing up, you're throwing a couple strikes here and there. He throws a punch, you realize it's coming to your head, you parry, throw an overhand right, and you knock him down. And then you get on top of him and finish with the TKO. And that's the thing I didn't like about it. But what they're adding in is apparently you can now come forward and use head movement. So instead of actually standing around, bobbing and weaving, you can actually move your head. I heard you can actually move your head and move around. So you're not just having good head movement, but you're also moving your head around, while coming forward or back away from your opponent. Kind of like a Anderson Silva. Now, we could pull up some Anderson Silva highlights, but we're not going to do that for the sake of, time. But I mean, if you can just go in there and just type in some Anderson Silva highlights. I'm going to put some in the description of like some good Anderson Silva highlights and just his head movement. I mean, that's basically what he relied on. That's how he'd have his head so exposed, but from where his head movement was so well, that's what made him one of the greatest fighters, in UFC history. And now it's moving on to just gameplay. Now, apparently you could have watched or played a little bit of UFC 3 at some sort of event, but what I did here was that they're actually adding in real player movements. Now, a popular game out, NBA 2K. Now they have actual players come in there to do the animations. Same thing for UFC 3. They're grabbing an actual UFC fighters that are on the roster. They're bringing them in so they can actually have animations in there. So I'm thinking that also the players, fighters rather, are going to look a lot more realistic than they did in UFC 2. Now I'm not saying, for example, in this fight that I decided to get started here, I'm not fighting with either one of them, letting the computer duke it out. But for example, Joanna Jacek looks like Nia Jacek. And now Rose Namajunas, she could use some work, but honestly, the worst and ugliest looking fighter that just had a crappy creation was Kat Zingano in the bantamweight division. Her character looked nothing like her. She even put on her Instagram that UFC 2 Kat Zingano looks nothing like her, and I totally agree. So maybe bringing in the fighters for animations, they might actually, look like, because that's how NBA 2K players look so real and so close to, how they look in real life, because they actually bring them in and scan them. And maybe UFC 3 might scan the fighters, because I heard that sometimes you can, I heard that only Fabricio Verdun can sprint and do some sort of jumping attack. We saw it in the trailer, but that is something that they're adding in. And in my opinion, I like how they apparently certain fighters have certain moves that they can do. I like it because it makes it realistic. It's like every fighter in UFC 2 had one specific punch, but yet you use another fighter, they have the same overhand right. You could have, this is completely off, but let's say you have Daniel Cormier. and let's say he has an overhand right, he throws it. Then you use someone like Alistair Overeem, and he has the same looking overhand right. So I like how they're going to try to spread out the fighting style, because we all know Conor McGregor has a different move set than somebody like an Anthony Pettis or Max Holloway, because they fight different. They have different fighting styles. And in my opinion, I like the variety. That's what I do like. And also something they're adding in are the weigh-ins, standoffs, and the press conference. Now, in my opinion, I like it because, you know, you play a career mode. You know, you're sitting there playing your career mode, but yet there's no standoff or no weigh-in. So I think adding in that, especially if they make it so that you can say certain, like, let's say they take like a WWE approach to it, and they make it so that you can actually pick what you want to say. So let's say after you do a weigh-in and you're talking with Joe Rogan, let's say you want to make it so that you can say, you know, something rude to the person, like just straight be just a bully to the person. Or you can be past, like, you know, the fighters like a Michael Bisping. Oh, I'm gonna knock you out, you're an easy fight, you know. And then give you the other option of, you know, we're gonna go out there, we're gonna do what we have to do to get the win, you know, and kind of do like a respectful approach. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I hope they're gonna do in this coming UFC. I mean, based on the trailer, everything looks great, and I did see on the roster where they could possibly, you might be able to see a heavyweight that is very popular and very common by the name of Brock Lesnar. I did see on the roster where there was Brock Lesnar. I said that they might actually put Brock Lesnar into the game. And I mean, imagine expanding the heavyweight division by putting in Brock Lesnar. He hasn't been in a UFC in a long time. Thinking about it. But I mean, UFC 3 so far, I mean, just based on the trailer, it looks fantastic. I like how they're just dividing everything up. I think that this is going to be the UFC that everybody's looking for, because I mean, just, okay, let's say you're an aggressive type of fighter. Now the people that parried are going to have to learn how to fight, pretty much. You can't sit back and block and parry. No. You better either A, have good head movement, or B, you have to throw a strike. Because I've met some people on UFC 2 that do not throw a strike at all and wait for the parry. And it gets annoying. So now in UFC 3, they're actually going to have to fight you. So I like how UFC is basically making it so that that person is going to have to fight you. And I like that, because now you can basically use a fighter and fight like that person. Like, for example, in this fight right here, Cody Garbrandt. He doesn't really necessarily kick or anything. He doesn't throw a lot of kicks, but the guy throws a lot of punches. And I think that, in my opinion, the realism is going to be insane. I mean, we've already seen just a little bit of the trailer, and it looks crazy. Standoffs, weigh-ins. I know I'm just repeating myself, but this is stuff that we've wanted to see in UFC. This is stuff that we've asked for, and they're giving it to us. I mean, like when playing the career mode, I'm like, yeah, I like the training. I like that you can train for your fights and everything. Work the bag a little bit. Work the ground game. Work the clinch. But what about the press conferences before? You know what I mean? Like, just I think this is going to be possibly the best UFC that we have wanted. I think this is what UFC fans wanted. I think this is what everybody else in the whole wide world wanted. I think this is going to be a great game. In my opinion, of course, I think it's going to be better than UFC 2. Of course, by far. UFC 2 had so many faults. I mean, the knockdowns, some of the knockdowns that happened, they were funny looking animations, but sometimes they just did not look real at all. And I mean, like how a lot of the fighters have similar punches and similar movesets, and how UFC 3 is giving them that variety, their own fighting style. Because let's say you are a Garbrandt and you have basically your main strikes are uppercuts, jabs, and hooks. And so, now once you get to UFC 3, you can fight like Garbrandt. You can fight like a Dillashaw. You can fight like any fighter that you basically use. But on UFC 2, it's basically stand in front of me and let's brawl. And that's what a lot of UFC fighters did on UFC 2, is they brawled. Because it's like an arcade game. Now, I don't mind playing an arcade game at all. I mean, NBA 2K14, for God's sakes, was an arcade game. But this game is basically like an easy game of freaking Punch-Out. I mean, you just sit there, stand with the opponent, and you just throw strikes. And I mean, we also saw a little bit of what the feints looked like in NBA. Did I really just say NBA for EA game? That is a violation. Alright, but I mean, we just saw a little bit of like how apparently now you can cancel your strikes as a feint. So if you're throwing a strike, you can cancel it by pressing the block button. So let's say you're gonna go and you're gonna throw a jab, or you're gonna throw like an overhand right, and you press the block button, you cancel that. So now you're throwing a feint that looks realistic. And we all know, and back in UFC 2, when you did throw feints, they didn't look too real, per se. And in my opinion, I think that, I mean, that's a cool feature. I mean, you can actually fake your feints now by canceling out a punch. And I think that's cool. I like that. Like I said before, it's the UFC giving that variety. That's basically all I have to talk for. All I have to say. I'm out and poop.